Okay, I'm going to do the translation on funerals. I just want to talk about death itself. Basically, what happens to us is our physical body gives up and our spirit travels on. There's another existence for us. Our spirit changes worlds. I think the society we live in gives such a negative portrayal of death. I've had Anishinaabe people that have had near-death experiences tell me what they experienced as they were close to death. And one of the things they said is that there is a doorway that we go through when we change worlds. And they said it's like a bright light. And that light that comes from there is so soothing, so loving, and so compassionate that it's almost hard to resist. It feels so good. And that, to me, is what I believe death is like. And that the place we go to is out in the west. It's called Gagige Minawanaguziwining, Land of Everlasting Happiness. And that is our job when we do funerals, is to send that spirit from here to that land over there in the west. And before that can happen, the family has to come and bring me tobacco. And usually with a lot of our families, they have feasts. They hold feasts prior to the funeral. It takes a lot of work on my part, but I don't mind doing that, because one of the good things about a family in doing that is that their tobacco goes out ahead of time, 4 nights before the funeral. And it's basically, I always think it collects over there where those money do sit. So that individual, the deceased who is passing on, will be helped for sure by those money due. And those feasts are good also, too, in a sense it allows the families to get together and for the community to come and show their support. When you're grieving, that can be really a lonely world. And by having these feasts each night, it kind of convinced the relatives, to come out and get together with their other relatives and community members, and for them to feel and see that support can help them dealing with their grief. So our teaching as Anishinaabe is that the body is held over for 4 nights, and during those 4 nights, the spirit of that individual travels and revisits every place he had been while he or she was here on earth. And one of the things I've always done is they put ash on the kids' forehead. Especially the young ones, they can see things that we as adults can't see. And they were always afraid, your young ones might travel with that spirit as it comes by. And putting that ash on their forehead prevents that from happening. And there's certain things that families have to do in order to prepare for the funeral. One of the things that's a must is that individual must have an Anishinaabe name. If they don't have an Anishinaabe name, then I was told you go back to one of their male relatives or female relatives and use their Anishinaabe name during the course of that funeral, and that individual will be helped just the same. Some other things to talk about here also is that I refuse to do funerals that involve a cremation. That is not something we were taught as a people. We were taught that our physical body should be returned to the earth. And I don't do those. Also, I discourage people from doing organ donations Your body wants to be intact and whole when it's returned to the earth. Amputation. One of the things I was told when it comes to amputation is to remember that the spirit is intact. The spirit of that individual is intact. And for example, if they had a leg amputated, we put the moccasins down there as if the leg was there. Same with the fingers. If they're amputated, we put gloves on them, put tobacco in between where the fingers would be, or else we just tie it up in red cloths and put it in a casket. I had once done a funeral where 2 of these Anishinaabe had burned completely in a house fire. There were ashes left remaining, and the funeral home put those ashes in separate coffins. We had two individuals, 2 coffins to deal with. And the old ladies that were there at the time told me, to lay everything out as if their bodies were in a casket. And that's what they said. And their spirit is intact. Everything is there. So it was, for example, we put the moccasins down where their feet would be. There's a blanket where you cover them from the waist down. We put the blanket there. And tobacco for their fingers was put in some red cloth. All of their bags are placed in there. So everything was pretty much put in place as if their body was there. So one of the first things you have to make sure your relative has one that has passed on is their moccasins. They have to be moccasins that are made out of deer hide. When I'm talking in the course of the funeral, I'm talking about that path that our people go on, and that there is footprints of Anishinaabe that have gone down that path, and they're all wearing moccasins, which is deer hide. So you're going to make sure that those moccasins are made of deer hide. Also, along with that, also you're going to have 2 quilts. One quilt, you cover the body of the deceased from the waist down. The other quilt is used for a bundle that must be on the floor below the casket the night of the wake. And in that bundle, you'll put 4 outfits for that individual. A towel and a washcloth, and a pouch of tobacco that goes into that quilt, that bundle, and that's the one that's given away at the end of the funeral at the cemetery. And the bundle sometimes goes to a drum keeper. And about a year after, they have a ceremony for those relatives who've lost their relative. And they're brought in and help to deal with their grief. If it's a family that does not participate in the big drum ceremonies, dances, you should tell them to give the clothing to an individual that they know will fit them and will take good care of them. And along with that, they also have to sew 2 cloth bags with a drawstring on top. They need to be 5 by 7. And in one of those bags, you're going to put the lunch for the individual that is changing worlds. And there's a small basket, birch bark basket that's made, biscuité dogons. That's brought in the day of the funeral. And they take bits and pieces of the food that's been brought in and put it into that birch bark basket. And that goes into one of the bags. And that is the lunch for the deceased, a lunch for his journey. They also carve out a small spoon, about as big as one of those wooden kitchen matches. They put that in there. And along with that also, you put 4 strips of birch bark and 4 matches. And the spirit, as it journeys on that path, stops 4 times. And during those 4 times, he or she makes a fire. So that's why the matches and the birch bark are put in there. And the other bags, the other bag is for the personal belongings of that individual that's going to change worlds. For a man, you always make sure you put a small pocket knife in there. For a woman, you always be sure you put a sewing kit in there. And then the rest is anything that they traveled. They were always took with them when they were out and about. For example, a comb, or maybe hair ties for a lady. All of those. Just one of the things is to remember not to overload those bags. You want to make their journey as easy as possible, so you don't want to overload them with personal items. And along with that, we also need tobacco. It has to be passed out at the funeral. We no longer pass out cigarettes at these funerals. It gets really smoky if everybody smokes at once, so we just hand out tobacco that can be smoked either in the ceremonial pipe or taken outside for the fire. And everybody needs to cook. They need to bring their cooking in to help. You're going to have a meal with the spirit of that individual, so everybody want to make sure they bring food. A lot of our organizations, a lot of our places nowadays, they provide food for our Anishinaabe at their feast. And a lot of our Anishinaabe people are used to that and don't bring food. When you go to a ceremony, always bring food in, regardless if you're related to the individual or not. Our old people were always embarrassed to walk in empty-handed to a ceremony. They always made sure they brought in food. So that's a practice we want to continue as Anishinaabe. And along with that, also, you need to get the plug tobacco. It's called spark plug, or all in a day's work. It's usually in that clear cellophane, rectangular piece of plug. And you're going to cut up 5 pieces of that plug. And those are going to go in between the fingers of the deceased. And what those are for is that as he journeys on that path, he's going to see 4 Manidug along that path. And the 5th one, the last one, is for, there's a river up there that he's going to cross. And there's a Manidug lying in that river, and he's not lying still, he's moving like that river is going. No one could cross it, it's so swift. And that's where they're told that when the Anishinaabe people use their tobacco even over there and put it down for that Manidug that's lying in the river, they'll be helped. When they put that tobacco down, the Manidug lies still and allows the spirit of that individual to cross that river. And once they cross, they're close to that place where our people are over there. So that's what the tobacco is for. Also, clothing. Any clothing you put on them should be clothes that they normally would wear during a given day. I just think it's really strange, to me anyway, when the Anishinaabe people put these real dressy clothes on our men, especially these suits and a tie. I just think it must look mighty strange when they get over there where our people are. They're walking on that path with the moccasins on and the suit on. The two don't go together, as far as my thinking. I wouldn't dress them up to that extent. This is probably an old Anishinaabe village, and you see this Anishinaabe walking in with a suit. Not cool. Also, some of our families will prepare and wash the body before its journey down that path. They'll wash them in cedar water. And also, a lot of these families, I encourage them to order a wooden casket for their family member that they have lost. We want the physical body of that individual to return to the earth as soon as possible, which happens with a wooden casket. But if you buy one of those metal caskets, it's hard telling how long they remain in that metal casket before they return to the earth. We want the body to be returned to the earth. That is one of those. When they do that, we offer our tobacco to that one to the earth. So, and when it comes to flowers for the funerals, I encourage those families I work with to bring plants. Way back, some time ago in Mille Lacs, one of these funerals, I guess it was probably the first time that flowers were brought into this funeral. And one of the elderly women got really upset and said, why did they go and kill these flowers for this funeral, just for this funeral? And I know where she was coming from. We as an Anishinaabe believe there's a spirit in everything. So I can imagine, that as they're cut for those funerals, they're probably screaming and crying at these funerals. So I encourage our families to bring plants instead, which is what they pretty much do nowadays. And the other thing that a lot of our families did was build grave houses, little houses over the gravesite. The place I see that happening quite a bit and done a lot is over in Odawaza in LCO. They still continue to do that. Over in Mille Lacs here, I don't know why, but it's just seldom ever see that done. But there are some families that have done that. I hope we get back to doing that. The other thing also, too, is that we have some families in the Mille Lacs area, that don't deal with the funeral home at all when they lose a relative. These are the ones that live in the Anishinaabe area. They know how to prepare the body without embalming. And they keep the body right in their home and don't have the funeral home at all involved, which is cool. Also, when it comes to fire, a lot of our people, I don't know where this comes from, but as soon as something happened to their relative, they want to start a fire and let that fire burn 24/7 until the time of burial. That is not something we were taught as Anishinaabe, at least from where I come from. Aazhoomog, the old man that raised me, also did funerals. I've never seen that done. And we don't do it, and I tell people we only make the fire at the wake, so people attending the funeral have a place to, or attending the wake have a place to burn their tobacco, and the same thing the day of the funeral. We have the fire going because tobacco's passed twice that day. So they have a place to put their tobacco. And I always tell our people, once you start making some changes, what happens is up the road people think that is what we were taught, originally we're taught. So that's why I try to avoid making any changes, because we can alter our ceremonies by allowing people to make these slight changes. And also I wanted to talk about when the actual funeral ceremony is held. There are some areas where that they only keep the body for 3 nights, and the next day they have the funeral. I was always taught that we wait 4 days, 4 nights. 4 nights, the spirit of that individual goes out and about and travels and revisits every place they had been while they were on this earth. Now, over across the river, I'm just going to say this directly, is that a lot of our Anishinaabe only wait 3 nights. And with some of their old men that did funerals over there always waited 4 nights. But there was a lady that came along and changed that. Now it's only 3 nights, so that's what I'm saying, is that people make changes, they think that's the way we were taught. And that's what a lot of those in the Wisconsin area believe today. I'm not faulting, I'm not saying anything mean about them, I just want to point out that this is what I was told.